And welcome back. In the previous video, you saw us fit the oil pump in place, the oil pump pickup tube, and start to prep work on what we need to finish in order to get the oil pan installed. And we went ahead and torqued down our oil pump bolts. As you can see here, as we torqued them, we just hit them up with a little bit of silver Sharpie just to mark the bolts so we knew which one we've torqued and which ones we haven't. Now you'll notice I haven't torqued the phaser bolt yet. That's next. Now, before I did that, I wanted just to make absolutely sure that I had my timing correct. Again, first time I'm doing this, last thing I want to do is have this step be off and then not realize it and have to, tear apart the front of the engine again. I've watched a couple other videos online, and one of the confusing parts to me was that a couple of those videos says for the bottom crank timing gear to be at the 6 o'clock position and the phaser to be at the 12 o'clock position. Now, why this may be true for other engines, what I'm finding out on the 6.4 may not be the case. And by that is meant that even in some of my previous videos, I stated that I've got the crank gear at the 6 o'clock position, and more or less it is, and the phaser at 12. Well, as I was getting ready to torque that down, I noticed today this mark on this phaser wasn't exactly completely at 12 o'clock. It was just, ever so slightly kind of pushed off to the right, which confused me because there's a guide pin on the cam, so the phaser can only go on one direction. Otherwise, it's not going to seat in place so you can bolt it. The timing mark, as you can see on the phaser, is between the two timing marks on the chain. And the bottom crank gear for timing, its dot was on the correct link marked with the timing mark. So, as I stated in previous videos, the lower crank timing gear is keyed to the crankshaft, which means for the lower gear to be on the correct link and in the correct position means your crank has to be in the appropriate spot. Same thing with the phaser. If the phaser is on the correct spot on the chain, and you have these links lined up with this mark and the bottom link lined up with this mark, then the cam in relation to the bottom crank should be exactly where it needs to be, because again, there's not enough slop in the guide pin of the cam for this phaser to shift left or right to that much of a degree that I was seeing when I was trying to get my lower cam sprocket, the dot itself, not even the mark on the chain, but just the dot itself to be exactly 6 o'clock. I noticed the top phaser would always be just kind of cocked slightly off to the side. So it wasn't until I found a video that I'll put in the description by Muscle Xtreme, also in YouTube, that kind of explained this. So one thing I wanted to show, and you should be able to see it there, is that if you look at the oil pump and you look at the keyway in the oil pump, you'll notice that's right about 2 o'clock position. And by keyway, just so I can point it out here with a screwdriver, is that square keyway of where this timing gear keys up to the crank. And again, just kind of notice this is at a 2 o'clock position. I did put the crank bolt in and moved the phaser, rocked it ever so slightly back to the left so that phaser was a bit more up and down. So it was up and down at the 12 o'clock position. And you'll notice the crank gear again is at 2. Now, I tried to get a picture of this with the borescope, which I will add, and I'll show it to you here in a bit. You can get a borescope behind that oil pump and look at the dot on the gear, or a dot in relation to the timing mark on the chain. So in case you're in a situation where you're doing a base timing set like this, where you're using the marks on the chain, if you find yourself rushed and you just want to verify that dot's where it needs to be without taking the oil pump and the pickup tube and everything off, If you got yourself a boroscope, and I'll show you here, there actually is enough space to get there behind there and at least see it and verify it. But what I want to do is bring you over to a little test setup I have here in the floor. And let me grab a Sharpie here. I need it as a temporary bolt. And this right here is the old crank timing gear, and you can see we've filled its dot in with a silver Sharpie, and you can see that we're on the link that has a timing mark on it. Same thing with our upper phaser here. Let me grab a light because I'm casting a bit of a shadow, making that hard to see. I really want you to see this, so in case you kind of run into the same little bit of confusion I was running into, hopefully this helps clarify it. And there we go. So you can see the mark in the phaser, the timing mark. We've just colored it in with some silver Sharpie to make it easier to see, is between the two linked marks, or two marked links, I should say. Well, I said that completely backwards, didn't I? So there we go. Now, what I'm going to do is, you'll see this is at 12 o'clock. Per what everyone states, that's at straight up and down at 12 o'clock. But you'll notice our lower crank gear on this setup, that's not exactly 6 o'clock, is it? That's more like 5 o'clock. And you'll notice our keyway, as we saw on the oil pump over there, is at about the 2 o'clock position. Now, looking at Modern Muscle's video on this, he explains this and points out the fact that this is not actually going to sit exactly at the 6 o'clock position. It's actually going to sit more at the 5 o'clock position, kind of how you see it here. So when I was looking at other videos and other examples, and it said to have this at 6 o'clock, when you turn this bottom gear again, because they're both chained together, they're both in a line at this point. So if you were to have this sitting at 6 o'clock, like that is right now, and then you put everything together, if you come look at your phaser, you notice your phaser is just a hair off of exactly 12. That's more like, I don't know, maybe halfway between 12 and 1, maybe not that extreme, but you can look at it and you can visually see it's slightly off. So remember that, at least when you're doing this, at least on a 6.4, this may be true for other hemis, that if you're doing your base timing and you know you've got that dot on that link, that timing mark link with that single timing mark, and the upper phaser's timing mark is between the two links, pointing right at the middle of the two links with the timing marks on it, that, again, they're chained together. So if you know that you turn this to be 12 o'clock, and let's say that's 12 o'clock, again, these are chained together. As long as that dot is on that link, you'll notice this is more like, again, 5 o'clock. So hopefully that helps, and it helps alleviate any frustration or confusion that, when someone says this is 6 o'clock, just be mindful. Again, it may just be the 6.4s that do this, or it may be all the hemis. I can't say for sure because I only have a 6.4 to play with. Is that this is not exactly 6. This is more like 5, just as Modern Muscle's video kind of demonstrated. And it goes in line with what I'm seeing in the install manual. You see, the install manual for this says just to make sure you've got that timing mark lined up, and you've got that timing mark lined up, and you slide the assembly on, because again, this is keyed to the crank, and this is keyed to the pin on the camshaft. And there's not enough slop in that pin and that key, that if you're using the timing marks in your chain, that you could get it even a half a tooth or even a quarter of the tooth off. It's going to line this sprocket up with that cam as, you know, again, one assembly. And if you turn this ever so slightly, the cam's going to turn with it. So again, just stating that this is setting base timing, and we're using the links on the chain with the timing links on the lower sprocket and the timing links on the upper sprocket. So if you've done that and you know this is all in line, and that's where it needs to be, that if you have your phaser sitting it straight up and down, and you look down below and you see this dot sitting, this dot and this link, this chain link with this timing mark on it are together, which they are, but this is pointed more at the 5 o'clock position, that to me says that we're in time and we're good. Because again, our keyway's at 2. This is more like 5. But again, if you look at our phaser, which is at noon, that's actually straight up and down as you would expect. And Modern Muscle, again, said pretty much the exact same thing in his video in relation to these timing marks. So again, if you're, I'm sorry to overstate this, but if you're doing like I did and you're searching videos and you got a lot of individuals telling you, oh, this should be pointed down at 6 o'clock. Well, that may be true for the engine you're working on, or it may not be true, like in our case here that I'm finding out where it's not. And again, just like the manual also states, it says just to line these marks up, slide the assembly together, and it mentions nothing about making sure this bottom mark is at 6. The only thing it shows is that this one, this mark here being at the top, and that you're lining up your marks in your phaser with your marks in the chain, and your mark on your cam with the gear down here. So just to let you know that if you're, because again, if you turn this, just to show it to you, you know, you've got everything chained together, and yeah, there's no tension on it, but there's enough of a bite there in the chain that unless you really get aggressive with this and turn this, that this shouldn't fall off of your lower sprocket, especially if you put everything together, get everything lined up, and even with the tensioner not engaged, it takes enough of slack up with the chain guide in there and the tensioner in there that it'll keep this from falling off that bottom sprocket. So once that's in place, if you turn this, this is going to turn in relation to this because, again, they're chained together. So I know that was a long-winded explanation, and I apologize for that. Just trying to add some additional clarification on here so you don't end up doing like I did, where you're like, oh, you know, I got my bottom sprocket at my 6 o'clock position because that's what I heard, but my top sprocket is just a hair off. It's not straight up and down like I expect it to be. And I will link Modern Muscle's video into the description. And based on the time that this is running, let me do one thing. Let me get in here with the borescope to show you. Actually, I'll cut in some video. No, I can't cut in video. Let me do it this way. Let me get you set up on a get you set up down there. We'll power on the borescope real quick, or borescope real quick, and I'll show you how you can get behind that oil pump and verify that initial base timing is still set, meaning the dot in the lower crank is still in the correct link of that chain. And I'll bring you back. And welcome back. Hopefully you can see that okay. But you can see the silver dot we put on the timing gear, lower one, and you can see the timing mark in that link. And you can see that that dot is in that link with that timing mark. And I'll try to get some video of this from the borescope itself, and if it looks better, I'll splice it in instead of this piece, but I'll give it a shot. But I wanted to show you that there because I said we'd look at this in the previous video. So, you know, I mean, in case you're in a situation where, you know, maybe you've done the oil pump install and you've got the pickup tube and everything in there, maybe you're second guessing yourself going, oh, you know, did I make sure I positively verified that if you do have one of these borescopes, as you can see, there is enough space to get in here and kind of look at everything, that timing mark and that chain with that link on it, that there is enough room to get in here and kind of verify that without having to take the pump out and the pickup tube and all that fun stuff. But just wanted to show you that it is quite useful. And due to the length of this video, I'll go ahead and end it at this point. And just to let you know that the next thing that we'll do is start getting the cylinder heads prepped and getting the cylinder heads ready for reinstall. I'm also going to torque in the phaser bolt, but you know, that's boring stuff to kind of show you on a video. Now I was conflicted on the phaser bolt as to whether I was going to use any Loctite on that bolt. I mean, I don't see it called for in a manual. I don't see other people doing it in their videos, but I do see Modern Muscle doing it. And it's just blue Loctite, which, you know, can be broken away with standard hand tools. But I think when I put that phaser bolt in, or that cam to phaser bolt in, I'm going to put just a little bit of blue Loctite on those threads. Nothing crazy, just on the end of the threads right before I torque that down, just for the added insurance, to make sure that bolt doesn't loosen up and, you know, cause any kind of problems with shearing pins off cams or anything of that nature. But I will let you go. We'll call the video at this point. Hopefully it helped maybe clarify any timing confusions that you may be running into. But again, I was just kind of using the information I could find along with Modern Muscle's video to make a bit more sense of things, and hopefully it was helpful. Thank you much. Bye. Test recording a video using the scope. So you can see the silver dot we put on the timing mark on the lower crank gear in relation to the timing mark on the chain. I'll see if I can get a better shot of it. There we go. You can see it good on that frame. Hopefully this audio and video is coming out okay. If it does, I'll splice it at the end of the video just so you can hopefully see that better than trying to look at the camera and then looking at or through a camera view onto the screen of the scope. But again, you can see our dot where we made the silver timing mark a bit more visible, and you can see the timing mark on the chain, that dot is right inside that link of that chain. So our base timing's good. But hopefully this works out, and I'll include it. Thank you much.